The agenda we've recommended is printed and distributed, includes business in an order meant to keep business moving. Without objection, the agenda is distributed as distributed is adopted. Hearing no objection, the agenda is adopted. Without objection, and for this meeting only, we'll use the same rules for electronic voting that we used in the previous SREC term. We can come back next meeting and look if there are any changes that need to be made and make a standing rule. If we need to take a minute and put the rules up on the projector, we can. The main thing to keep in mind is don't take the devices out of the room. Hearing no objection, the rule on electronic voting is adopted. Electronic voting for non-secret votes may be used at the chairman's discretion, assuming no objection from the body. If there is an objection, a majority of the SREC may approve electronic voting for that vote. The SREC shall use the devices approved by the officials committee for all electronic votes. Each individual voting device shall be registered and identified on the tabulation device with the unique machine address and the name of the voting member to whom it is issued in a list to restrict the devices that may be used to vote. Voting members are each entitled to only one vote. Therefore, voting members may vote only on the device assigned to them. No member may vote for another member under any circumstances, except that one member may vote as the official proxy of another voting member also. Electronic voting devices that are not issued to a member or proxy at a meeting due to absence shall be secured under the direct control of the sergeant at arms or their designee during the meeting. I have not seen our sergeant at arms yet today. Okay. Not seeing her. Dwayne, would you be willing to serve as acting sergeant at arms? Sure. Without objection, I appoint Dwayne Wright as acting sergeant at arms. Seeing no objection, so appointed. Votes. The result of the vote, including names of SREC members, shall be displayed or projected during and until the end of the voting period. The poll shall be declared closed by the chairman unless there is an objection, in which case a 2/3 vote by a method other than electronic voting shall be required to close the voting. Secret ballot votes must be taken by paper ballot. Every voting member shall have the right to confirm the record of their vote either privately or on the projection screen before the result is announced. If a method for such confirmation is not available or not functional, electronic voting shall not be used. All right. Now we're on the election of SREC woman for District 29. On July 26th, Lisa Sprinkle, the SREC woman for District 29, tendered her resignation. If she's watching at home, Lisa, thank you for your service. This created a vacancy, which I noticed in the call for this meeting. For our bylaws, a majority of the SREC membership must participate in the filling of this vacancy. And we have sufficient votes today to do so. Are there any nominations for SREC woman for District 29?
This is Mark Dunham, SD 29. I nominate Barbara Carrasco. She's been a hard worker for the Republican Party in El Paso for many years. And I would ask my fellow SREC members to support her in this effort. She has run for office in the past, ran against Beto O'Rourke, as a matter of fact, in El Paso. And I would kindly ask you to support her. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, then we're just doing nominations right now. We'll come back more in a second. Any other nominations for SREC woman for District 29? Okay. Hearing none. Since she has made the effort to travel from El Paso, if you will allow Ms. Grasso a moment to address the body from the microphone.
thank you. As Mark indicated, I'm here to fill the vacancy of Lisa, who's a very hard worker. She spends a lot of time volunteering in the office of El Paso, and we appreciate your service. And I would ask for your vote to replace Lisa. I've got big shoes to fill, and I hope I can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Having the one nomination, I will entertain vote by acclamation.
So moved.
Without objection, all in favor of electing Ms. Grasso to SD 29 committee woman, say aye.
Aye.
And I say welcome. Not coincidentally, we did that first, so then she can vote. The rest of us,
You're here.
yes, that affects the roll, right? We are now at 61. Okay, now we are on to bylaws amendments. RPT Rule 8C requires that the SRAC bylaws be amended by a majority vote of the entire membership at the organizational meeting, which we had right after the convention, and the first regular meeting, which we will have at September 22nd. But by a 2/3 vote of the entire membership at any other meeting, this meeting included. Because this is a special meeting and not the first regular meeting, the threshold for amendment, therefore, is 2/3 vote. I distributed with the call 2 documents concerning bylaws amendments. The first set I'd like to take out is a set of non-substantive changes aimed at general cleanup. This is a result of the charge that was given to the Rules Committee at the SRAC meeting in January of the last SRAC. The amendments made to it were available to those members for comment for 3 months. That document was then distributed to the entire SRAC the week before the state convention. I will entertain a motion to adopt these non-substantive changes.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Ramsey, SD 7, so moved.
Thank you. And we have a second. So Mr. Ramsey from SD 7 moved, and we have a second. Thank you. All right. Now for discussion. Ms. Ramsey is the mover. Would you like to address first?
No, I'll reserve.
Okay. Mr. McCloskey.
Mr. Chairman, Mike McCloskey, Senate District 5. In view of the fact, as you mentioned, that 44% of the folks here are new to the SRAC, plus we have proxies and other folks who were not present 3 months ago. We have more than 50% who did not have those 3 months to review this. And it would be appropriate to, the Rules Committee considers individual bylaw amendments. It would be appropriate to refer this to the Rules Committee at the next regular SRAC.
Thank you. The next speaker.
I brought a motion.
Actually, you didn't. You just said it would be appropriate to do it.
I moved that.
I didn't hear you make a motion.
Okay, I moved that we refer non-substantive bylaw changes to the Rules Committee at the first quarter meeting for
Because you be having so much fun, did you? Didn't know you'd be having so much fun. Yes. It's okay. I'm streaming to our 10 viewers.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to refer all of the proposed rules changes, non-substantive, since that's the only thing on the floor right now, all of the non-substantive rules changes to the Rules Committee. So a vote yes is to not take care of this and instead send it to the Rules Committee. A vote no is to take care of this now. All in favor of referring it to the Rules Committee, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. The ayes have it. The non-substantive changes are referred to the Rules Committee. The other document contains several substantive changes. We can take this one up as each member steps to the microphone to move the adoption of each. Anyone?
Yeah, for Mark Ramsey, SD 7, I actually agree with the previous motion. Okay, we've got an election coming forth in November. And we need to unify this body going forward, putting things behind us. So I actually think, I mean, there's nothing in those rules that I think, those proposed changes, that I think anybody in this room would disagree with. But in the interest of transparency and unifying the body, I actually agree with Mr. McCloskey's motion. On the substantive amendments, or what are called substantive, I don't think any of these are terribly controversial. There are two of these that I do think are very important. And with the exception of these two, I would propose that the rest similarly get sent to the Rules Committee for consideration at the September meeting. There's two that I believe are actually important to try to pass at this meeting. The first, the motion, if we would look at, these don't have page numbers, but the title of it is Update Eligibility for Legislative Affairs Committee. If you'll turn to that page. I would like to propose amending this and help me with the parliamentary language here. But instead of making the changes, which as the chairman said, have been out on the internet for everyone to see since January, I believe, instead of going with those changes, I would simply add a section 6 to, that would be 8H2C6, that would read, none of this section's eligibility restrictions will apply to non-voting members. Secretary.
And, yeah, if I may, for the sake of clarity for the body, noting that that's one you want to accept. You said there were two you wanted to accept. What's the other one you want to accept?
Correct. The other one is really a cleanup in the bylaws. There were new rules passed at convention. One of those new rules provides a mechanism for county executive committees or county chairs to take a dispute to the officials committee. And the rules right now are unclear as to exactly what the makeup of that officials committee would be until September. So the second one that I think should be included today is basically to plug that gap that would, in essence, extend the term of the officials committee from the convention to the next officials committee election in the event emergencies or this mediation Rule 8, Section K, or it's N, I'm told. It's basically to make the bylaws conform with that convention rule change that we adopted just a few months ago.
So, if I may restate your motion is to refer to the Rules Committee all the proposed substantive changes, with the exception of the one around officials committee membership qualification and the one around officials committee temporary structure. Legislative affairs membership and officials committee membership.
Correct.
Okay, separate. So we have a motion and a second. A discussion on this motion to refer to the Rules Committee, all except those two.
Yes, Morgan Brown, SD 27. I absolutely do trust my colleagues, but in the words of Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. And I think it's incredibly important that the Rules Committee have the opportunity to not only go over all of these, but also be able to have discussion. And because this is such an abbreviated meeting, 2 to 5, I do not think that it allows us to give these changes the attention that they deserve and the thoroughness that's required. Thank you.
Okay, so that's one against the motion.
Carol, Mr. 3, Mr. Chairman, speaking in favor. We have 3 hours. We just removed much of the business that we had, so we have time to look at these. These are going to be small changes, and this is one of the most intelligent bodies in the state of Texas. I'm pretty sure that we can handle this. So I support going ahead and addressing these 2 minor issues.
Mike McCloskey, Senate District 5. I do agree to a point with the motion, and that is that we can refer all these to committee, and the remaining 2 items can once again either be voted up, be voted down, or could also be referred to committee. But I agree with let's vote and move all the others to refer them to the Rules Committee.
Mr. Chairman. JT was SD11 speaking in favor. After further review, these have been out a while. Our rules have changed. These changes are more about continuity and making sure that we as a body and as the Republican Party of Texas continue to function in a very efficient and smooth process. So I'm going to ask members today to go ahead and support this. Thank you very much, Mr.
Very well, SD30. I would also ask to have these sent to the Rules Committee prior to any more discussion. Thank you.
Okay. So, seeing no further discussion, all in favor of sending to the Rules Committee everything but those 2, the 2 being the membership of the Officials Committee and the membership of the Legislative Affairs Committee, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. Okay, the ayes have it. Okay, that leaves us now with 2 pending substantive rules changes to discuss. Entertain a motion on one of those now.
Okay, I think I've kind of made the motion. If the secretary could catch up, I'll restate the motion. On the page where it says eligibility, update eligibility for Legislative Affairs Committee, we're not at this point proposing the stuff that's in red, or the strikeouts or the added in Part C, the child, sibling, or parents. I think those are all good ideas, but we're not doing that right now. What I am proposing is we add a section 6 that simply says none of this section's eligibility restrictions will apply to non-voting members. Section 6, none of this section's eligibility restrictions will apply to non-voting members. So they can still be a member of the committee, they just could not vote as part of the committee, at least at this point.
Because Clause C only applies to voting members, that there's no need for that addition, unless you want to make change to voting member eligibility.
So if we struck voting, then that would make 6 more relevant at that point. I want to make it clear that no one on this SREC is prevented from being on this meeting, and it's only a voting issue. On the committee, I'm sorry. And I've been asked to make a friendly amendment to change the word will to apply, which is what I meant to say. Will apply to shall apply, sorry.
Okay, so a couple of things to remind the body of. As members of this body, every member of this body has a right to address any committee on any issue. So I'm not sure that a clarification to allow a member of this body to participate in a non-voting manner is necessary at all, because every member of this committee gets to participate in a non-voting manner on every committee. So I'm a little confused.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Mike McCluskey, Senate District 5. As was pointed out, a couple of us, the change he's recommending is not what's in the notice. It's not properly noticed, and folks have not had an opportunity to review that. Once again, this just gives another reason why perhaps if he's not satisfied with the language that was sent out, maybe this should also go to the Rules Committee. So I'm going to move that we refer this to the Rules Committee as well.
Mr. Chairman?
So, the motion that was being attempted to be made was in fact out of bounds. You know, to change something in the header when nothing was noticed, changing in the header, for example, would be out of bounds of what was noticed for the meeting. So that actually makes the motion inappropriate, out of bounds, out of order, and therefore not up on the floor at the moment. If you're welcome to try and bring a slightly different one, but that one's out of bounds.
Mr. Chairman?
Man, I hope you guys are enjoying Kyle's cake experience.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, sir.
Would it be appropriate that there's a point of order that's on the floor, so would it be appropriate for the chair to rule sustain, overrule? I just trying to get clarification of your rule that you just made.
Yeah, this is a notice issue. We have for bylaw changes to be considered by this body, they have to have been appropriately noticed. What was noticed in this one didn't include any change to the first section of C, right, to the intro of C, and therefore any change to the intro of C would be inappropriate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that the parliament, Mr. Chairman, so therefore you're saying that one, the gentleman's point of order is sustained, and number two, Mr. Ramsey's motion is out of order. Is that correct?
Yes, his motion's out of bounds, out of order.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yep. Okay, now, Mr. McCloskey, if you'd like to make your motion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that this particular item also be referred to the Rules Committee for consideration at the first quarterly meeting.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Discussion on whether or not to do this. Whether or not to refer this one also to the Rules Committee.
Would Mr. Ramsey's, marked up on SD 29.
Thank you.
Would this be a recommendation of an amendment, and is that allowed according to your ruling?
Yeah. I mean, there's, from our rules, bylaw changes can be made if they are properly noticed. And what's noticed in this section is what has strikeouts or modifications are at. So any change to any of that stuff that was struck out or added, that's appropriate discussion during this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Okay, so we're now on the motion to refer, which has been made and seconded. Discussion on the motion to refer. Mr.
Turtle, District 3, speaking in opposition. There's a very real reason that this is being amended. We're doing committee appointments today. There are folks that are on the SREC that want to serve on this committee and are going to be prohibited if we don't get this change in. This is a minor change. It's being overcomplicated. We want SREC members to be able to serve on the Legislative Affairs Committee regardless if they're a staffer or not. We need to be able to have this conversation today because at the September committee meeting, we have a lot of work to do to get ready for session. So I ask that you oppose this motion.
So, Mr. Ramsey, if I could ask a question, how does striking C2 not get at what you're hoping for?
Well, okay, to answer the chair's question, I'm perfectly good with what was noticed. Okay, I think this is a good positive thing for the SREC. I think it's a good positive thing for the party. I think it's a good positive thing for this particular committee, which will function as the mouthpiece of the grassroots before the 86th legislature. I'm completely good with what was proposed and noticed. The reason I wanted to make it simpler was in deference to the new members, who, some of which have expressed concern that they don't know what we're talking about yet. They didn't have time to look at the bylaws. And this was I thought, a simpler way to keep, in particular, one of our members that is on the committee as we speak, on the proposed committee, from being kicked off. Now, as a point of maybe information, the member we're talking about is Tanya. She's been proposed as a member of the Legislative Priorities Committee. She happens to also work for a legislative office and a campaign treasurer for that office. And that's an issue I wasn't even aware of when I put this notice in. If it is the understanding that the chair can appoint Tanya to this committee as a non-voting member, but just as the committees have been sent out for everybody to look at, then that solves the problem for today.
Yeah, and my reading of this rule is the rule as it's written would only prevent an applicable person from voting in the committee.
Okay, but you could, and we could still approve Tanya as being a member of the committee.
Personalities aside, there is nothing saying you're not allowed to serve. It says you're not allowed to vote.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to refer this to the Rules Committee. Any further discussion on whether or not to refer it to the Rules Committee? Yes, sir.
Mr. Brian, SD 22, I'm in favor of sending it to the Rules Committee. Well, in fact, this was voted on at the state convention. Just yesterday, for an example, just yesterday, I was switched from Legislative Affairs to Rules Committee because somebody else was going to be pushing over to Legislative Affairs. My original request, or to fill in on the Legislative Affairs, was not my top choice. So it was just a simple lift and shift. We're all on the same team, same fight, right? So if we have an ineligible person, can we not work together? Call up other SREC, see if they want to change or switch. That's what you have a battle roster for, right? If it was voted on by the people, let's stay. Send to the Rules Committee.
To be clear, SREC bylaws are not voted on at convention. RPT rules are not SREC bylaws.
I would send this to the Rules Committee. I'm having a discussion.
Thanks, sir. Any further discussion on whether or not to refer? Seeing none, all in favor of referring this one as well to the Rules Committee, this one being the one around Legislative Affairs members being employees or not and being able to vote or not. All in favor of referring that, oh wait, got another option?
Sorry, quick point of information. Are we referring the original notice change, or are we referring what I thought was going to be a simpler change?
We are referring the notice change.
Notice
The committee would then be free to modify it to their will. And just so it is in our bylaws that all rules changes be proposed 12 days before a vote. You got copies of these things 12 days before the vote. So I'm concerned about a lot of comments of, I didn't have time to read these things or think about them, when this is how it's going to be, always. You will have at least 12 days for notice on the rule. You guys get to decide whether to refer or not, but please keep in mind, you will always get 12 days notice at least on rules. Okay, so. Okay, so now we're having the vote. Now we're having the vote to refer this rules change also to the Rules Committee. All in favor of doing so, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. Sounded to me like the nay said that. So it is not being referred. We will now continue discussion on this proposed rule change that you were noticed.
Motion to amend, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Number 2.
Yes, so Mr. Holcomb, you have a motion to amend the notice rule change.
I do. On number 2, I would like to reinstate number 2, all of what was struck. And I would like to say a person who is not an SREC member and the rest of it.
Okay, so you're not so you are removing the striking of paragraph 2 and revising the intro part of paragraph 2 instead. That keeps it within bounds of what was noticed. Make sure we reflect your amendment properly on the screen.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second to amend it.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, we're a little lost.
What are we talking about?
Okay. Paragraph 2 in the proposed was struck, instead unstrike it, and replace the first few words of that paragraph 2 now. And change the first few words of paragraph 2 to say a person who is not an SREC member, who is, so on. So rather than removing paragraph 2, it narrows down paragraph 2, so the paragraph 2 only applies to non-SREC members. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Is it, Mr. Holcomb, is it reflected appropriately on the board now? Sorry, I want to be sure we get this right.
Who is Jeff striking for?
Point of information.
Yes, sir.
Chris McDonald, SD6. Who are non-SREC members of the Legislative Priorities Committee?
Currently, there are not any proposed, but there's no rules against them.
Understood. So clarifying, at this time, all members of the Legislative Priorities Committee are also SREC members.
Correct.
Thank you.
Actually, right now, there are no members, but hopefully in a few minutes, we'll fix it.
Has the chairman previously appointed anyone to the Legislative Priorities Committee for which this would apply?
I honestly can't recall about last term, but I'm not aware of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Mike McCloskey, Senate District 5. I served on the Legislative Affairs Committee in the last term. There were people, when this was written into the SREC bylaws, there was discussion about whether or not staff members should be included, and there were people, when this was added to the bylaws, that had to remove themselves from the committee. So this has been an issue in the past. Once again, I mean, we're changing that the other direction now, and so I think that, once again, I think that requires a greater amount of consideration. I think that this is, you know, as you said, the language that's being amended here is a non-issue. That's not the issue going on right now because there are no non-SREC members at this time proposed to be on that committee. I think we need to give this due consideration, and there was a purpose in doing that when we have members of the SREC who have the dual role of being employed in the state legislature or for a state legislator. And there was a purpose for that, and I think that needs to be given due consideration before we just rush and make language changes today to make it fit to whatever somebody's trying to accomplish. So I think this is a mistake to do this in this manner, and I'm going to vote against. Thank you.
Thank you. Noted.
Chris Holcomb, SB3, speaking in favor of my motion. I was the chairman of the Legislative Priorities Committee, and this was discussed last session. Pretty much the committee ran to the safest place possible. It was a new thing, we didn't know it, and we ended up losing some good committee members. That, by the way, still worked on legislative priorities, but weren't able to work with the committee. An SREC member does not need to be barred from working on this committee. The integrity level here is very, very high. There are not going to be conflict of interest issues. I think there are 19 people on this committee or something of those natures, and we have some really good skills. We have some really good relationships that are built with some of these folks that are in the Capitol, and this body needs to take advantage of it. And I'm just saying, let's not prohibit an SREC member from filling this slot.
Just in these minutes, I just hadn't had a chance to get it.
Thank you. Any further for or against?
What was the link?
Yes.
I'm not sure I understand why we won't.
One of them said weekly update. The other one was oh yeah, I included a link on there at the very bottom. Said please consider donating.
Actually, it's actually very constructive. The person, it's something, a guy gives $1,000 to that. It's a guy that I recognize, and he was not a big James fan actually. So the fact that he just gives $1,000 like that.
Maybe we need to start writing like that moving forward.
Okay, so point of information, just to remind everybody, is for you to ask me for information. I think it's self-explanatory. The rule did prohibit anyone who was serving in any of those roles in their everyday life from being a voting member of the committee. This amendment would undo that.
Chris McDonald, SD6, speaking against this amendment. This was put in play to ensure that we did not have any bias to a member of this committee by nature of their employment. We want to ensure that persons, even an SREC member, was not unduly swayed in their for or against by their employer. That's the concern expressed here. And further, to my colleague from the CRC concern, we also don't want paid lobbyists serving on our internal committee. Hence, they might have something that would be counter to our goals. So it's best that we have persons with no pecuniary interest in this particular issue serving on the committee. They're only here by their heart, by what they believe personally, and are not subject to sway by their employer. I'll further add that this discussion came up during the State Rules Committee at the 2018 convention. And at this point, we did pass a state rule that clarified that if you are a member of a committee and have a pecuniary interest, you must declare that and not vote on that particular item. So I would urge this body to maintain this rule that we do not permit persons with a pecuniary interest that's subject to the whim of their employer or that serve as a lobbyist to be on our legislative committee. Thank you.
Randall Bunning, SD16, talking in favor of the amendment. Okay, I work for a defense contractor. Does that mean I can't vote on defense policy portions of our platform? I mean, I guess you could say I have a pecuniary interest, but whether I was working for a defense contractor or a telecom company, which I work for both, I still have the same interest in defense. Okay, so the point I'm saying is we all work for all kinds of different things, and unfortunately, thanks to what the Democrats have done, they have made now every aspect of our society political. So that means we all essentially are disqualified from something. So let me perhaps suggest something else. We're all adults here, and I hope we are all of the mind, like those of us who served on city councils, where we recuse ourselves when there are issues that we might think or others might think would be a conflict of interest, and leave that up to individual recusal of the members, rather than making a rule that eliminates one whole group. So I think this amendment is appropriate, and I'm going to argue for it, and I'm going to vote for it, and I hope you all will as well.
Point of information.
Thank you.
Chris McDonald, SD6. Chairman, if you could define for the body what the rule refers to in substantial pecuniary interest. It specifically made a reference to local government code, and maybe Mr. Howe could provide that for the body.
We are not advised, but also, I mean, you're welcome to make that kind of point in debate, but it's not directly relevant to the body unless you decide to make its own debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Andrew.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members. I want to kind of clarify a couple of the issues that this will impact body on. Again, this has been up there 9 months plus or minus in various forms. It was noticed 2 weeks ago. I mean, there has been a lot of time to study this if interested. I want to get away from that and talk about the effect that this will have. I actually like Mr. Holcomb's amendment better than my original way of handling this, because what it would effectively do is guarantee that every member of this body can serve on this committee as an official member, business cards, letterhead, the whole 9 yards. And to me, we're looking at the cream of the crop when you look at the activists in the Republican Party. And it seems to me that we're unnecessarily shooting ourselves in the foot if we say that the activists can't be part of this lobby group to go try to convince the legislature to pass our legislation. It just doesn't make sense in a practical kind of way. Now there is the appearance of conflicts, and like Mr. Dunning said, and I had earlier conversations with Mark Dunn, I think this is best handled by the members simply recusing themselves from any votes that might actually give that appearance of conflict. For example, if their representative were somehow maybe on the wrong side of the issue, or even on the same side of the issue, they should just recuse themselves from any votes that related to that. There's some real practical considerations here. I worked in the legislature last 2 terms, the 85th and the special, and having somebody that's a bona fide employee that is actually on the inside part of the computer network. There's a parallel network that's slightly better if you're on the inside part than the public part. And when it gets down, especially to those last 2 weeks, and things are happening very, very rapidly, and there's committee substitutes that are flying around, and minutes or hours count, having access to that inside part of the system is a huge advantage. It might give you an extra day or 2 notice of a committee hearing, for example. In terms of getting people at that committee hearing, that is far better than a notice that comes out 24 hours in advance of that committee and then trying to get people from all over the state to show up and testify in any cohesive fashion. When it comes to the legislation itself, if we allow members who are working for the legislature to be on our committee, that lets us in a direct fashion deal with the attorneys that are the staff attorneys that are literally drafting the legislation itself. And I don't want to take a lot of time describing this, but it is absolutely invaluable having that direct connection to the Legislative Council, both with amendments on the floor, amendments to legislation, getting the legislation worded right in the first place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we don't make these changes, effectively, we're shutting off all those advantages. And for what? Because we don't trust each other? I hope that's not the reason. I mean, we're all grown-ups. We've all got our integrity at stake with absolutely everything we do. I see this as a way to move forward, to make the committee a much more effective body. And last, to you new members, most of us take the representation aspect very, very seriously. We want to represent our districts. Sometimes that means even voting against our own personal wishes. If you don't make these changes, what you are effectively doing is decreasing the representation for anyone's district, yours, Tanya's, anybody that would be affected by these restrictions. So for those reasons, I'll be supporting Mr. Holcomb's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, without objection, we'll waive the roll call requirement. All in favor of making this amendment to the bylaws, as noted, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. That is not 2/3. The motion fails. Okay. So we still have this as noticed set up. That was the motion to amend. So now we are in the motion as distributed. The rule change as distributed, removing section 2 completely.
Mr. Chair, more on the word, Tim. I would ask for an infinitesimally small modification. If you look at paragraph 3, it reads, a person who is the spouse, child, sibling, or parents of a person described in 1. That should say child, sibling, or a parent. So I'd ask for the change of adding the word a from the parents and making the word parents singular. So we use proper grammar.
Is the article even necessary? Because we've already had parent.
It is, because it says the person who is the spouse, child, sibling, or parents. So a person who is the parents doesn't make sense. A person who is the parents could be, if you could do that, you just say make parent singular. So I'll before I get a second, I'll just say make parents singular.
I'll second it.
Great. So the amendment is changed for a parent of a person. That's perfect. That's fine. Great. So the motion is to change parents to a parent. Is there a second?
Yes, second.
Okay, we have a second. The motion is in item 3 under C in Article 7. Oh, yeah, sorry. Warren North, SD10. Any discussion on the amendment?
Point of information, Mr. Chairman, that is just an amendment to the notice change. That was not original language. So are we going to divide the question and vote on these numbers separately? Or are you going to incorporate all the red into one?
The motion yeah, sorry. The screen is not reflecting what I have as the entire notice change. The notice change was to remove 2, renumber what is now back to 3, and add the words child, sibling, or parents in between spouse of a person. So that was all noticed. So his amendment to just change parents to a parent would be within the notice changes and therefore appropriate.
I just noticed, are we going to, just point of information, 4 and 5 are also misnumbered, should be renumbered 3 and 4, right?
No, because we didn't remove 2. We would have renumbered them, but we didn't. So.
Mr. Chairman, Michael Rain, Senate District 26. I'd like to speak in favor of the suggested amendment to change it to a parent rather than parents. However, I would like to suggest that to keep it internally consistent as it reads, it should read a person who is the spouse, child, sibling, or parent. I agree with the singular, but I would suggest deleting the article A to keep it internally consistent.
I believe Mr. Norton had actually ended at that same place. Had you not? Mr. Norm, are you amenable to changing your motion to just say parent instead of a parent?
I was fine either way.
Okay. Yeah, and I wasn't wrong person. Okay. So the only change is to remove the S on parents.
Very good.
Any discussion on removing the S on parents? By acclamation, all in favor of the amendment to remove the S on parents, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it. Okay, now we are back to the changes noticed, except we had already, the body already undid the removal of 2. Actually,
No, we just defeated.
we undid the revision of 2.
Yes.
Correct. Chris McDowell, SD6, point of
My apologies.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Is it correct that the last motion that failed, the addition of who is not an SREC, which was proposed by Mr. Holcomb?
Agreed. So
that
actually,
puts us back to the entire strike of number 2 is on the floor.
it does. The strike of number 2 is on the floor, and therefore we will be renumbering 3, 4, and 5, assuming mistakes.
But at this point, sir, Chris McDowell, SD6, I speak against the entire removal of number 2 for the same reason I stated before. We need to maintain the number 2 in our rules so that a person who is a registered lobbyist or a person who is in the employ of one of the listed persons may not be on the committee. So therefore, I would ask that this body vote against striking number 2.
Okay, so the amendment from the notice rules change is to not strike all of 2 and instead leave it as originally, as previously in the bylaws, as currently in the bylaws.
Mr. Chair.
Is that stated correctly, Mr. McDonald? Did I say that correctly? Do not remove 2 as noticed and instead leave it as currently in the bylaws.
I'm speaking against what is noticed, which is the strikes. So,
So your amendment would be to unstrike.
I did not make an amendment, sir. I spoke against what you had on the floor. What you had on the floor, sir, was what was noticed to us. So I was going into debate.
Okay.
So I'm speaking against.
So you're speaking against this.
I'm speaking against what was noticed to the body.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Bob Kessick from District 1. Based on that voice acclamation vote, there were a lot of people who did not vote. And I propose that we have a roll call vote so everyone's on the record on this number 2.
That's fine.
That's fine. I was going I would have said without opposition, we'll skip the roll call vote. You could have just said I oppose. I object. Sorry. Okay, so there is not a motion currently on the floor. We are in discussion on whether or not to accept these rule changes as amended. Yes, sir.
JT, I was just a prominent inquiry.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, would it be in order, or would the chair, would it be in order for a motion to reconsider based off of voice vote? Is that normal? I'm just asking.
You're concerned about the voice vote we just had about removing the S?
No, that's
the voice vote.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so that's not, that would be out of order, is that right? That's my inquiry.
It wouldn't be out of order, it would be extreme.
I'm a keeper extreme,
Okay. Any further discussion on this rule change as proposed?
Point of information. For the new members' information, I kind of know the answer. Point of information.
Yes, sir.
If we're doing voice votes only, how do we account for proxy votes if we're voting for 2 people?
Speaking of court, and I'll catch both vote. I have a feeling when we get to the actual vote on this actual change, assuming we do, that will actually be a record vote, whether electronic or otherwise.
It made you laugh.
And Mr. Chairman, Randall Dunning, SD 16, I'd like to speak in favor of the current strike. And I'll make the same point I made before on the previous amendment. Because of the fact that the Democrats have turned everything in our civilization into a political issue, we are now at the point where we're all guilty of everything, or at least guilty of something. Now because of that, I'd like to point out that what we're doing is we're disqualifying one group of people, their occupation, that being consultants, who happen to have been elected by their convention caucus to be SREC members. Let that marinate a second or two. You are disqualifying people who were elected to be SREC members and represent their district because of their employment. I think that is wrong. I think we are self-limiting beyond measure, and I think we all are smart enough to recuse ourselves if there is something that would be a true or bona fide conflict of interest. So, for example, if we had a platform element that somehow the state was going to buy its own missile defense system made by my company, yes, I would probably recuse myself from that vote. Yes. The point being, we can make our own decisions to recuse. We don't need a rule like this calling out one thing, because apparently we've now determined that those people who are political consultants are apparently worthy of some special disability. The defense contractors are not. So therefore, I strongly recommend this body go ahead and accept this strike, and let's move on. Thanks.
Any further discussion on accepting this as proposed? Seeing no.
I have a point of information.
Yes, ma'am.
And possibly a motion. Okay,
Name and SD.
Leslie Thomas, SD 23, thank you. Point of information. The motion that's on the floor, is it all that was noticed, the strikeout and the addition of the parents, the siblings and the
Correct.
parents? Okay, that's all, that's the main motion.
Correct.
Okay, my motion is to move to divide the two questions, the strikeout and the addition of the parents, the siblings, and the...
That would be in order. Second. So a motion and a second. All in favor of dividing the question, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. The ayes have it. Okay, so we are now voting on the strikeout only of 2 and the subsequent renumbering of everything else. All right. Having had discussion on that.
Do we have room for one more? Marker in the SD7. I don't want to belabor the points I made earlier, but I would remind the body, those of you that were here last time, and advise the new members that this language was put in there as a compromise, basically to try to get the votes of those who frankly were against having a legislative priority committee in the first place. We didn't know how it was going to turn out. We didn't know if it was going to be a success or not. And what we have found is it was a resounding success and moved the ball forward in promoting our platform and our values. We can still have the Rules Committee take a look at this for the September meeting if we go ahead and vote for this change now. And I would put that to the Rules Committee personally. I'll commit to that. And if we go ahead and pass this now, we'll still send it to the Rules Committee, and in their greater wisdom, if they decide it's not a good idea, we turn around and vote it back down at the next meeting. But in the interest of making the Legislative Affairs Committee stronger, not weaker, since it was a huge success last time, I would strongly recommend that you give it a chance and vote for this bylaw change.
President Dunn, SD6. I speak against. I was the person who authored the rule at the convention that ultimately led to the creation of the Legislative Authorities Committee. It has truly been a resounding success by those people who have led that committee. No one's authority or ability to represent their district is lessened by prohibiting a person in such employ from being a voting member of the committee. As the chairman's already testified, he can appoint a non-voting member of the committee who can then serve on the committee in its stead. So no one is prohibited, nor are they lessened in their ability to represent their district. Further, just because they can't vote, they can still come before the body or before the legislative committee and testify to try and sway that vote. There's nothing that prohibits that. So all this concern is valid. However, it isn't valid about the people that are currently named. It's valid about the future and those that might come. And that's why it's important that we maintain this standard. Further, I'll state that it was added at this convention by rule, Section I, that clarifies no member of a state executive committee, CEC, or state convention committee may vote on any issue for which the member is a registered lobbyist or has substantial interest as defined by local government code Title V, Section C, 171.002 with respect to the issue to be voted on. So this has even been considered at state convention. And the body of our convention at state felt this was something that needed to be in our rules. So I would encourage you to vote this, to leave this in our rules so it mirrors our state rules as well. We don't need lobbyists or persons who may be swayed in the future by nature of their employ. Thank you.
Mr. McCloskey.
Mr. Chairman, Mike McCloskey, Senate District 5. We heard from the author of this proposed amendment that we could vote for this and then reconsider it in the Rules Committee. We can also vote against it and consider it at the next Rules Committee as well. And I would tell you that I heard something in debate today that really concerns me, and that is that folks that work in the state legislature have access to information that other folks do not. I think we would be very disturbed if people of the other party were using that for state party business for the other party. And I think we as a party need to take the higher ground and say that we will not stand for that. I will not support this, and I think it's a bad idea for our party to take that position. Thank you.
Point of information?
Yes.
The other party is using this against us.
They should.
Stephen Broad, I'm with SD 23. I'm speaking in favor of. I think we should support this in view of Mark's stipulation that we'll come back and revisit it again in rules. But in the meantime, in order to facilitate movement and to facilitate us going forward, let's support this, revisit it in rules later, and if we decide that it is unacceptable, then rules will make that decision. It's not acceptable to have a second-class SREC member who cannot be a participant in the legislative process.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz?
Motion to amend.
Okay, motion to amend.
I've heard some of my colleagues' concerns, and I'm getting some messages on something that I think we can do to try and help with that. I would like this to say a person who is a registered lobbyist.
Second.
So leave the first four words, a person who is.
A registered lobbyist.
Add the word a, leave registered lobbyist, and put a period at the end of that, and end everything else. And continue to remove everything else. Okay, staff, if we can make sure we reflect that properly. No longer delete item 2. Leave the first four words. Add the word a. Leave registered lobbyist and delete everything else. correct.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we won't be removing a number two, it will still be there. That's right. Speak to your amendment.
I believe the amendment speaks for itself in the spirit of compromise. Please support it.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed to the amendment, say nay.
Nay.
Mr. Chairman, I propose we
So we have this is an amendment to a motion on the floor, so it only requires a majority. Mr. McCloskey has requested a vote.
Click this.
So therefore having.
Go ahead and click it.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, actually, he just requested we use the clickers, so we will be using the clickers. That's not saying it's requesting.
Chairman, point of clarification, could you restate what we're actually voting on at this point?
We're voting on amending the strikeout of 2 so that it's not completely struck out and instead still makes ineligible to vote a registered lobbyist.
Point of information?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr.
Hey.
SD6. So with the net effect of this, now permit persons employed for compensation, full-time or part-time as a political consultant, or as a staff member of a person described in section 1 to be a voting member of the committee.
That is correct.
If the amendment is approved.
Yes. If this amendment carries, that will then be what we're going to vote on when we vote on the main vote.
One moment.
Okay. Everybody under clickers. You're ready here.
I'm sorry. Your resolution is way too high for this issue. So turn your resolution down.
Welcome to the first electronic vote of the new SRAC term.
By seconds.
In the meantime, we'll put it back on this.
Switch it back and just unplug hers and plug it into. This is by settings.
It's yeah, we're getting it fixed right now.
This is the same screw we used last time, isn't it?
Oh my bad.
Down, General.
Yeah, down to 800 by 600. And
Pretty much nice.
SPF 40.
Pretty much as low as it goes.
We have a special guest I'd love to have chat with you for a minute, but we've got to get to a good breaking point, not in the middle of the discussion to be able to do that. So let's get through this. For anybody who is new, you've got a clicker. You each have your own clicker. Only SRAC members or proxies with an approved proxy form should have a clicker. SRAC members who also have an approved proxy form should have 2 clickers.
Doing it so far?
Yeah.
1/A is a vote for a yes for the motion on the floor. 2/B is a vote for no for the motion on the floor. To abstain, you keep yourself off the clicker and you don't vote on 1 or 2. And it really works real well. So yeah, 1 for yes. 2 for no, 1 for aye in favor of the motion, or 2 for no.
Mr. Chairman, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, can you not vote, as I believe we voted number 3 as abstaining, as a vote to abstain versus a non-vote? That is a different thing.
Thing in the middle as well.
Yeah, welcome
Plug that
to,
directly into.
since this is.
I'm just saying there are 3 choices.
Like
actually.
this, directly into.
You can, in this case, it's not relevant because this is not a percentage of the body. Vote is a majority vote. So an abstain or not voting is actually the same, exactly the same consequences.
But you have that option.
But yes, you have the option
There we go.
of free to say, I really, really abstain.
Mr. Chairman, Mark
Yes,
Dunham, SD 29, which can, for our new members, which computer is it that we're gonna be aiming our clickers at? If everybody, the new members, please notice the gentleman who's holding his hand.
So this is
you know
Spencer
which
Davis, our
computer you
new-
need to be aiming your clicker at.
It will not do you any good to aim the clicker at the screen. The computer's over there. So, aim your clicker at the computer. That's where we'll receive the signal of your vote.
Also, Mr. Chairman, once again, there's still confusion. Would you please restate the amendment to the main motion on the floor so folks understand what they're voting for?
Yes. So this amendment is an amendment to, instead of removing all of item 2, leaving some of item 2, only that part dealing with making it not allowed for someone who is a registered lobbyist to be a voting member of the committee. So a registered lobbyist would not allowed to be able to be a voting member of the committee. If you approve this. Everybody ready?
There won't be a sound.
Staff ready? Okay, now we're not doing the cool ding thing or anything like that, okay? Ready? Go. Point at the computer.
You have a sound on it?
You want this with it? Yeah. Sorry. Okay, yeah. Well, I want it. I just didn't know I was going to get it. I can't show both at the same time. It's the only issue. If you want your name, I scroll through it.
Okay, so voting is closed. The motion passes. The amendment passes. And the voting responses, I remember we had to play around and like shrink the cells and stuff to get it all to fit on one screen. He's trying to get those cells to shrink to fit it all on one screen.
So easy. That's not going to work. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yes.
This might be a few seconds premature, but can I move to commit this to the minutes, the record?
That would be a new vote. So is there a second for the motion to get this to the record? There is a second. All in favor? Yeah. So without objection, we will go ahead and commit this to the record. No objection. We'll commit it to the record and the amendment passes. And this is a decent break point to allow our special guest to come up for a moment.
Yeah. Let's see. Where were we? That's for you. Plug it in.
I got it saved.
So, for several years now, the party has had an excellent external audit firm. Our external audit firm also does other specialty party organizations like the National Republican Senatorial Committee and the National Republican Congressional Committee and the RNC. So we have the benefit of working with the best in the business. And as you all know, the audit committee was charged at our last meeting to work with our outside audit firm and get a review of processes. And I have asked the head of our audit engagement to come and give you a quick overview of where we stand right now and how it's going. Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Myers. The audit committee asked me to do 3 specific procedures outside of doing a full-blown audit. Those procedures were just to make sure that information presented to the committee here
have been for this past year still accurate. One of the procedures is that the cash position that is presented at the January, April, and I believe at June meeting agreed to the accounting records. So that was one procedure. The other procedure is to make sure that all funds transferred to the convention fund were then transferred back to the original funds. The third procedure was to sample revenue generated during a 6-month period, January through June of 2018. On Friday, I was at the party offices and completed the procedures. I don't have a full written report just yet. Everything was fine. I didn't find an issue. I found a small discrepancy of $1.20. Right? Yeah. Which is so what we were doing goes a step kind of above an audit. As an auditor presenting an audit, $1.20 is something I'm probably never going to mention. We use materiality. With these procedures, we actually follow it to the exact procedure. And any finding gets noted. So in September, I'm going to come and present a report to you guys. It's going to say that, these are the 3 things that I was asked to do. This is what I did, and I found $1.20. In favor. So the main point of concern here is, with the resignation that occurred, are things in the accounting department for the RPT still working well? Were there any issues during this year? I have not found any from what I looked at. So hopefully that gives y'all some much needed peace. Thank y'all, and I'll see y'all again.
Mr. Chairman, wasn't that $1.20 about the equivalent of the cost of a cone of ice cream?
The chair is not advised the cost of ice cream. Okay, now we are back on the motion as amended. So the issue in front of us is the amendment to Article 7 at Section 8H2C to, instead of removing item 2, we now have a much shorter item 2, and instead of renumbering the rest, we just had some slight changes to item 3, adding the child, sibling, or parent. So, that is the motion on the floor right now. Any further amendments to the motion on the floor?
I have a point of information.
Yes.
I have been appointed, not yet confirmed today, to the Legislative Affairs Committee. And yet, according to this rule, I am prohibited from serving. And I wanted to let the body know that I am the wife of a county official, the county clerk of Harris County. And as that means that I am the spouse in item 3. And I will be approaching the Rules Committee, which I am also have been appointed, assuming that that gets confirmed, and asking for an amendment in September to change either the spouse name being removed or county public office being removed, so that, because there is no legislative or lobbying problem where it conflict. So I wanted to, because of the conversation that was held today, I felt you needed to know that there was going to be one more issue of similar fashion, but will be entertained in September because spouse is not in red. I can't bring it up today.
That is true. It's out of the scope of changes today. Actually, to be clear, the way the rule is written, you can be on the committee, you just can't vote on the committee.
I want to vote.
Parliamentary inquiry.
But also, a point of information is you asking me for information, not giving the information. So,
Parliamentary inquiry. Randall Dunning, SD 16, I believe we bifurcated this issue, and so are we going to vote on them
We did,
separately?
yes, so now would be the time to vote on the change to item 3. Thank you for the reminder.
That's what we're voting on.
Mr. Chairman.
Separated, we divided the issue. We divided it. It's two separate votes. We voted on number 2, now we're on what used to be number 3. We voted on changing the
Because the question was separated, we won't get to that until after we decide whether this goes through or not. So the item on the floor right now is to accept this change as noticed with the changes to item 2, and only the changes to item 2. We divided the question. So, the item on the floor right now is, do you want to accept the change to section 8H2C, this bylaws amendment requires 2/3 approval, as amended? And as amended, it's this new wording for 2 instead of the deletion of 2. Well, that's 3. Yeah, we'll go back up to 2. Okay. We're not talking about 3. 3 is completely out of the question. You guys asked for it to be divided. So 3 is not relevant. All you're voting on is, do you want to make this change to our bylaws, and it requires 2/3, and since we already got the bookers out and stuff, might as well work. Okay? So, if you're in favor, press 1. If you're opposed, press 2. If you abstain, press 3. This requires 2/3 of the body.
1 second. Point of information?
Sorry, of those voting. Yeah, 2/3 of those voting. Yes, sir.
Chris McDonald, SD6, so what would be the net effect of a yes and no vote?
A yes vote would be to adopt this as modified into our bylaws.
And a no vote would keep the previous language?
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
No vote would be to not accept this change. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Actually, if you could approach the microphone, identify yourself, name, SD. Otherwise, it won't show up on the live stream. Nobody will hear you.
Thank you, Chairman. Carlos, SD21. So you just said a no vote. Would that take us back to the original strikeout?
No.
No. Okay, so a no vote just means we don't accept this change.
We don't accept any change to 2, and then we're on to the question of the change to 3 because we divided the question.
Thank you for clarification.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Debbie Terry, SD12. I speak in favor of this motion, and I think it might be instructive, particularly to everyone who's hearing me, and to those of you who were not on the legislative affairs to have just a little bit of information. I was on the original committee, but I came by my assignment by an unusual manner. When the committee got together, there was nobody on the committee who wanted to take the priority of religious liberties. So my good friend Tanya Robertson, God bless her, was sitting in on the meeting, as any member can. She said, if nobody on this committee wants to handle this priority, I volunteer me and Debbie Terry. Thank you, Tanya. And so Tanya and I began doing the work. I'm not exactly sure what people think happens in this committee. The purpose of this committee is to take the legislative priorities approved by the delegates of the convention, and then we as an SRAC added 3 more. Our job is simply to take those priorities and track every single bill that is filed. Anything that falls under those categories in their entirety, we are tracking those bills. I don't remember a controversial vote. We have our marching orders at the beginning of this. And so we simply did the work. Chairman Meckler then appointed Tanya and me to be on the committee. And then we passed bylaws. And those bylaws meant that Tanya Robertson was the shortest serving legislative affairs committee member in the history of the city. She was on, but she continued to do the work, and she brought a perspective and a wealth of information and understanding of how this whole process works that we really, really benefited from. So for those of you who are thinking there's something that could go on in the Legislative Affairs Committee that could advocate for something other than what has already been decided, you're wrong about that. So you can be at peace. I stand and support this, and I urge you to do the same.
Just an update to the proxy report. SD 18, Edie Sinclair is the proxy for Mr. Figueroa. It's already been reported to the secretary.
Excellent, thank you. And the secretary has that?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mike McCloskey, Senate District 5, just a small parliamentary inquiry to kind of fine tune something that may have been said. I'm reading in the rules of 8D, the SRC bylaws may only be amendable by a 2/3 vote of the full body of any SRC meeting, which means it's the 2/3 of the 64, if I'm not correct. Would that be accurate? This was amended at state convention.
No, Mr. McCloskey, if you'll read 8D, that 2/3 of the full body only applies after the first quarterly meeting. The first quarterly meeting is September 22nd. Therefore, we are under Robert's rules. Robert's rules is 2/3 of the body. Actually, we're under SRIC bylaws, and SRIC bylaws is 2/3 of those votes. 2/3 of those votes. Okay, seeing no further discussion, the vote on the floor is whether to accept the recommendation as amended to reduce the restrictions in item 2 from multiple classes to only registered lobbyists. Okay? All in favor, press 1. All opposed, press 2. Any abstaining, press 3. Or just don't vote. Go. And there's the computer over there.
I'll cover the names at the end. I'll show the names at the end. I don't want to block anything. The end.
Can you see the names, please?
The end, you're going to show that. It's going to block you.
People are trying to figure out if they're the ones missing. Down 45, there should be at least 58 total.
You point that way.
Point at Spencer.
Yeah, make sure you don't point at this. That's showing us one.
There, it's in there. Anybody else? Anyone else got a complaint?
There's only so much that can be done. You're going too fast. Slow down.
Okay, voting is closing in 3, 2, 1. Votes are closed. And the ayes have it. The rule, the bylaw is amended as amended.
Thank you, members. Could we have that committed to the record as well, might I ask?
It automatically is. Okay, now we are on to the change with item 3. The change with item 3 adds child, sibling, or parent to the a person who is the spouse of an elected official.
Mr. Chairman, Jason Ross, SD2, I'd like to make a motion to amend number 3.
Okay.
So after the word person, add who is not an SREC member, and, oh, I'm sorry, the first instance of person.
Oh, okay, sorry.
This is known as the Stanard rule.
Standard rule.
Yeah, unfortunately, because spouse was not noticed, and your change would impact what happens with a spouse, it's out of notice. The rules committee could take it, I haven't considered the next one, just can't consider it now.
I have a second part of that amendment though. The second part would be to add at the end of 3. So after the 1 in parentheses,
Okay.
add the words or the spouse of a person described in 2.
Yeah, if you can jump up. He's jumping up.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah, they're not.
The spouse of the, of what? Sorry, of the spouse. Thank you.
I've got to determine that that's also out of scope of notice. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I motion that we suspend all necessary rules to allow these changes that he's motioned.
Yeah, the problem with doing that in this case is you guys would be voting to remove rights from those who aren't here. That can't be done. Okay. All right, so any other changes to item 3? Seeing no further changes to item 3, let's vote on adoption or not of the item 3 change to this rule. So that would be adding child, sibling, or parent to the relations of an elected official or a candidate for office.
So I think all the stuff
of the people who are
that was out of order.
not eligible to vote on this committee.
Yeah.
So this is
out of order.
you just reduce some who's not eligible to vote, now you're going to be increasing some who's not eligible to vote. Okay? So these are other relations of elected officials. Child, sibling, or parent of an elected official. Yeah, so the item in red is all we're changing. Child, sibling, or parent. Yeah, I said that. I thought I said that. Yeah. Elected officials or candidates, we're talking about now, a child, sibling, or parent of an elected official or candidate would now no longer be allowed to vote on a committee. All right. Again, this requires 2/3 of those voting. We will do electronic voting. One is in favor of adopting this change, so that as of now, in addition to spouses not being eligible, child, sibling, and parent of an elected official or candidate would also not be eligible to vote on the Legislative Affairs Committee. If you're in favor of that, it'll be a 1. If you're opposed, it'll be 2. If you're abstaining, it'll be 3, or just don't vote. We ready, Chairman?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
David Helms, SD12. Can we defer to the Rules Committee without a vote?
Well, you have to have a vote to refer to the Rules Committee.
So moved.
So we have a motion to instead refer this to the Rules Committee. And a second. David Halverson, SD12. Well, made the motion. Okay. It only takes a majority to do this. All in favor of referring to the Rules Committee, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. Even with the proxies, I think that was clear. All right. The motion passes, it's referred to the Rules Committee. Okay. If you all will indulge me again, our treasurer Larry Hicks has been phenomenally patient and been here most of the day talking to the county chairs and being here for the training for the new members. He's got a couple of pieces of information he can update you on. I thought it would be helpful if he did so. Please welcome RPT Chair Larry Hicks. Treasurer, RPT Chair.
Thank you, sir. This will be an abbreviated treasurer's report. As you all know, the accounting staff has been in transition over the last several weeks. And so we do not have current and complete up-to-date financial numbers, especially the operating income, fundraising income, and operating expenses. We do not have those numbers for you today, but should have them by the time we meet in September. We do have current cash balances, and the operating cash balance is $565,265. This is down a little bit, actually about $100,000 from where it was the last time we met in San Antonio. As we've talked a number of times, that number goes up and down, and with the convention out of the way, I'm sure fundraising leading up to November election, fundraising should be going full speed. The other item that we have almost complete information on is the convention. The total cost of the convention is going to come in at about $1.6 million, and the bills from that are all paid. There is still the matter of a $35,000 advance that was made from operating funds to the convention fund to make sure that all those bills were paid. There are still outstanding some receivables from the collection, and one sponsorship and some exhibitor fees that are still in the process of being collected. That should almost cover that $35,000. The difference should be somewhere under $10,000 by the time we're all finished. So that, Mr. Chairman, is all I have to report this time.
Any questions for?
President Dahl, SD6, could you just speak to the balance in the payroll fund?
I'm sorry, the question is?
Could you speak to the balance in the payroll fund?
Yeah, the payroll account is simply an account that money is deposited into when the payroll checks are paid out of. So the balance is never anything more than a nominal amount.
Thank you,
Does that answer the question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So for those who were here during the orientation back from 1 to 2 o'clock, Kyle and Larry and John Alvey all did a great presentation on when we take in money, we have to appropriately put it in federal funds or corporate funds or state funds or all that kind of stuff. Well, as you can imagine, nobody wants 8 paychecks, right, split up. So the accounting folks figure out how much comes from which of all those accounts to pay payroll this time, and then puts it all in payroll, cuts checks, and the money goes, the balance in payroll account always goes back $75. If you can look back years, and the balance is always $75. That help? Excellent. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, Mr. Ramsey, I recall there were 2 motions that you wanted to consider, and we finished with one of them.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure I want to do another one after that. But there's a lesson to the new members is that, you know, if you lose on an issue in this body, it's mostly a pretty forgiving body. You just got to go on to the next issue. And that's, you know, so I'm going to go on to the next issue. And I didn't lose completely on that one. So. Anyway, the next issue, I really do view this as a cleanup amendment. And those of you that don't know me yet, if you ever question anything I'm doing, just ask. I'm about as transparent as they come. And whether you like the answer or not, I'll give it to you. But this one, as I mentioned earlier, addresses what is currently a little bit of a vacuum in the bylaws created by the recently adopted RPT rules that we adopted in June. And that vacuum is that in Rule 8, there are provisions where the officials committee is called to act. And right now, as we speak, at best, it's a gray area whether that officials committee even exists or not, and what the composition might be. It could only be 2 members, for example. And so what this proposed and noticed amendment does is basically closes that time gap. We have precedents for doing this. The CRC committee has a term that extends past the convention. And basically what I'm proposing here will take whoever happens to be on the officials committee prior to convention and gets elected to the SREC for the next term would continue on that officials committee. So in the event this Rule 8 gets invoked, or actually any other emergency that the officials committee is supposed to handle, then it provides us at least a skeleton committee to actually take care of that. And I move adoption.
Okay, there's a motion. Any discussion?
Chris McDowell, SD6. I'll speak in favor of Mr. Ramsey's motion here. Serving on the State Rules Committee, 8M was added to permit a county executive committee to appeal an action to the officials committee in an attempt to handle our intra-party business amongst ourselves. Previously, the only other option was to take someone to court, and that's pretty nasty when you got Republican going against Republican in court. And it can get used against us at election time. It's best that we handle such it's best that we But anyways, just continue on. I support this particular measure because it does provide that internal body to mediate those disputes. Please support Mr. Ramsey's amendment.
Mr. Chairman, JT of SD11, I'm also speaking in favor of this. One of the things, as my distinguished colleague, Mr. Sis, pointed out, the rules have changed. The commissioner voted those rules in, but more importantly, it's about continuity of government, which is a founding principle within our democracy. And the officials committee plays a very important vital role. It's not just only incident resolution, but also a variety of other functions that they need to confer with the chair in order to conduct the party's business. So I'm going to urge members today to please support this. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's 3 in favor. Any opposed? Seeing none. This is a bylaws change, requires 2/3, so I think we should use clickers.
What's that?
Remember, point at Spencer. And 1 is for a yes to accept this change as noticed. 2 is to vote against this change as noticed. And 3 is to abstain, as is just not pushing. So, this will be recorded. Roll call vote. Yeah.
The last one was clear.
Okay. All in favor of the change as noticed? No amendments. 1. Opposed, say 2. Abstaining 3, voting starts now. We're at 45 so far, so we'll start showing who's missing. Sue, there we go, gotcha. Judy, gotcha. Allison, gotcha. All right, voting is now closed. And the final count is, motion passes. 53 to 5. Okay, so that's it on the bylaws changes. Okay, at this time, I'd like to appoint Art Martinez Navarra as Assistant General Counsel. Including our General Counsel, this would bring us to 5 attorneys on the team. Art previously served in the same role for the RPT, as well as a bunch of other great roles in and around the party. He adds to our geographic coverage in South Texas and will focus his efforts to ensure we have a rapid response legal team ready for election day issues. Everybody, this is Art Martinez Navarra. Please welcome him. Is there a motion to confirm Art's appointment? So moved. And we have a motion that's Morgan Graham, SD 27. And we have a second. Great. And all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Of course not. Art, would you like to address the body for a second? Art Martinez Navarra has been confirmed to serve as Assistant General Counsel. Congratulations, Art.
Thank you everyone for your vote of confidence. I know most of you, and I look forward to working with you to get the Democrats held the next 2 years, and we'll do our efforts to try to keep those elections clean. And again, thank you for your confidence.
Okay, because many of you would be attending the SRC and candidature training, Brandon, Kyle, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to go ahead and confirm committee appointments, and also because it gives you a chance to have meetings in advance. So with the bylaws allowing teleconference committee meetings and the ability for the committees to meet in person on the day before our next meeting, we can get a jump start on the work and really get the ground running by establishing these now. While my committee member nominations get up on the projector, I will go ahead and read off the committees being created that are not defined in the bylaws along with their charge. So first is convention arrangements. Along with the staff, they'll research and make recommendations to the state chair to ensure the 2020 convention is a success. They'll be diving into the venue, the production company, program, vendors, events, and all other aspects of the convention. The advancement committee will recommend to the state chairman working groups that will assist the party to achieve significant improvements in results via changes in processes, procedures, and technology. The committee will serve as an explicit channel for RPT activists to help improve operations. The committee will work with the SRC, staff, and Republican activists to promote meaningful participation by our grassroots volunteers in the implementation of new technology, processes, and procedures in a manner consistent with the direction of the convention and the SRC have provided to the party. And then engagement will identify opportunities to engage specific communities across the state and recommend methods of reaching them utilizing our platform, our candidates, and activists. The membership of each committee is on the screen. I would like to, or it will be in a second. I'd like to point out a handful of changes since the notice that you received. There's not a notice requirement for this vote, so for the specifics of the committees. That's it. Okay. So the items that are changed are in red. So you can see in legislative affairs, Chuck Branch has been added. And on rules, Tripp Bryant was added, and in reality, those two were just flipped. They agreed to swap based on their personal preferences and where they ended up. Down on the second row,
It's thinking.
yeah, keep going. You can see that on advancement, Chuck was added, and there was one new space, so I didn't have a problem with that. And I also added Naomi Narvaez, our first non-current SRC member. And let's see, were there any others? There was. On convention arrangements, there should be an ad at the bottom of convention arrangements. It's down the next row down. Yeah, to the left. Next row over, there we go. Where'd he go? Yeah, Mark Dunham should be on that list. Oh, okay. Sorry, this is a non-synchronized copy, but that's the only change that wasn't synchronized, as far as that. So Mark Dunham should be also on the list of convention arrangements.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Dunham, SD 29. I'd like to sit there and give the opportunity for Barbara Carrasco to be added to committees. Hold on.
Sure. Well, let's take a look. Actually, I'll just take a look locally. The committees we have room for. There is a space. I'll wait for Ms. Carrasco to be available to hear me. There is a space available on the resolutions committee if you would like to do the resolutions. There is space available on advancement. There is space available on convention arrangements. And there is space available on auxiliaries and coalitions. I would not recommend you first time out that you be more than a couple committees. But there's plenty of opportunity for you to work with others, and I'm amenable to changes in there up to that.
Well, my preference actually was rules and engagement. You didn't indicate it was in the middle.
Yeah, neither of those have available space, sorry.
Okay. Let me study the rest.
Pardon?
I'll have to study the rest of them to see if there's anything there that.
Okay, but if you'd like to be approved, we're on the motion right now to approve the membership. So study quickly. Study quickly.
We have information, Steve Atwell, SD9.
Yes.
Also the volunteer committee on there anymore?
Correct.
Did you roll that into another committee function?
No, one of the things I'm going to be talking about this more in a moment, but an important concept for everyone to be comfortable with. Generally speaking, it is my intention that committees serve as decision-making bodies or recommendation-making bodies. There's, for efforts where we need implementation work rather than so much decision work, a great example, election integrity. We don't need to decide if we support election integrity, we do, right? We have a lot of work we have to do around election integrity, but we don't have to make recommendations to the body about do we want to do this or not, right? Do we want to do that? So the distinction between committees and working groups is on whether their primary function is to make decisions or to implement effort, and the volunteer dinner was the primary function of the volunteerism committee, and the volunteer dinner, we are going to have it, and it's going to look a lot like the last one, except, possibly a different venue, possibly a different speaker, right? That there will be those things, but that's all implementation questions, not strategy questions. So there will be a working group for volunteers.
Okay, is that
For the volunteer, pardon?
Isn't that a standing committee?
No, it is not.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, Sue Evenwell, Steve One, I did not realize when I filled out that form that I was sent that every option that I took would be noted. Therefore, I find myself on too much. I'd like to resign if possible from resolutions, although I hate to, but I will resign if that's possible today.
That's great. You and I had already had that discussion, and so actually, I'm already reflecting on my copy, so we need to get that correct on the screen. Okay, yes, we're reflecting it now. Thank you very much, Ms. Odenwald. That's very kind and generous of you. Yes, ma'am.
I would want to take Sue's place on resolutions, and I'd also like to honor advancement.
Advancements, yes, ma'am. Okay. So, resolutions and advancement. Oh, shoot. Okay, so great. The committee woman from 29 has requested, and I'm happy to nominate her for membership on resolutions and advancement. Any further discussion on the appointments?
Point of information.
Yes, sir.
I'm seeing my colleague, Mr. Tom Roller, on 5 committees. Are you putting him on 5 committees, Mr. Chairman?
So, Tom is in a unique spot because he's on CRC and the audit committee, neither of which were part of this process at all. Every one of you had the option to ask for up to 3 committees. He asked for 3, and based on the way we did the ranking and provision, he was able to get all 3. Now, since then, he looked at that and said, ooh, that's kind of too much. And so he has said he wants to pull off 1 or 2 of the committees, but I do not have from him which 1 or 2 he wants to pull off. So my recommendation is appoint him to all 1 and just resign from whatever committees he wants to resign from. It is not my belief that it takes the body's approval to let someone resign from the committee. Okay, so without objection, we will all agree to let him resign from whichever ones he wants to resign. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I did want to express my desire to be on legislative affairs should Mr. Waller wish to resign from that at a later time. Thank you.
I bet you could make him a deal. That's it. All right. So, and just from a general strategy standpoint, the point of these committees is to work out those decision points before the body has to deal with it. So that by the time it gets to the body, it already reflects a very clear consensus. That is one of the reasons why I was amenable to committee membership counts that are, on the larger side, but smaller than our state convention committees. And I think, and as we worked through it, our attempt was to give everybody at least their first couple of choices. For some reasons, based on hierarchy and a bunch of other stuff, it didn't quite work out that way. But hopefully everybody got a lot that they should have gotten, a lot that they would like to be on. And that certainly was my intention. So, yeah, we will see if we have quorum issues. Brandon's working on a schedule that minimizes conflict. We will have 3 to 4 windows a Friday. That'll be the potential for conflict, and you guys will, I trust you guys to work all that stuff out. So, as revised from what I've noticed before, this is actually my proposal to the body. I will entertain a motion for you guys to confirm my appointments.
So moved.
Second. So.
Second.
Yep. Okay. So it's moved and second. Any discussion? further? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Is this the appropriate time to remind you of what you asked me to remind you of?
Not yet.
Okay. So you want to do it at any time?
Actually, I now have it in my script. You'll hear it.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
JT was SD11. Will the gentleman yield for a few questions regarding his previous statement? I just want to know.
Okay. Now I will let you guys know my appointments for chairman of each committee. These do not require confirmation, but they do require that each of the members be a member of the committee. For party organization, and as I call your name, if you would just stand or continue standing. For party organization, Marion Knowlton. For auxiliaries and coalitions, JT Edwards. For resolutions, Virgil Cruz. For rules, Jan Duncan. For legislative priorities, Mark Ramsey. For convention arrangements, Dion Starnes. For advancements, Tanya Robertson. And for engagement, Alma Jackson. Please join me in thanking these people. All right, I have one more committee. Yeah, so we noticed committee changes. There is one more committee change that I would like the body's confirmation on. Okay. Ms. Shipman, would you like to serve on the Candidate Resource Committee?
I absolutely love that, yes.
Okay. Jack Barcroft has noticed his need to step down from the Candidate Resource Committee, opening up an SREC position. The recommendation to the body is that Hannah Shipman step up and fill that spot vacated by Jack Barcroft. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. And of course, there are none. Congratulations. Thank you. Okay. There are a couple of committees that are going to already have a mountain of work ahead of them. I anticipate several will be making use of telephone meetings. Those telephone meetings will be announced to everyone. Of course, the Committee on Rules will have a lot of work to do now, a whole lot more work to do now, before the next meeting. Under RPT Rule 8C, our September meeting allows the bylaws to be amended by the majority of the membership. Please begin to disseminate your requests and suggestions to Jan Duncan and the other members of the Rules Committee quickly so they can manage the business and workload for the committee in preparation of that meeting. Yeah, they already have a lunch, already on the table. Resolutions. Committee on Resolutions, during the campaign for state chair, one of the questionnaires sent to the candidates asked how I would uphold then Plank 95 on only providing financial support to those candidates who support the right to life planks. I replied that if that plank remained, I would ask the SREC to set the guidelines and that I would abide by your decision. That plank is now number 332. Please, Resolutions Committee, look into that and be ready to report on it at the September meeting. Auxiliaries and coalitions. The Committee on Auxiliaries and Coalitions, please especially get to work reviewing and qualifying our past auxiliaries. Please also be looking for opportunities to review coalitions under the new language. I think there are opportunities for certain coalitions to be created to especially affect the November elections. Beyond that, those early coalitions can get the ball rolling for making our platform a reality within the legislature and on the local level. The Committee on Party Organization, please recommend projects that can be passed on to working groups. Let us know not only the outline of the project, but have recommendations on who you think should be leading those efforts. Let us know if they cost money, ideas on how to raise the money if they do, and what should trigger going forward with the project. Kind of like Kickstarter. Also, work with the political department on specific voter registration efforts. The voter registration deadline is October 9th. There is no time to waste. Please consider the feasibility of the state party working with local parties to fill precinct chair vacancies and how to prioritize those efforts. Please work with Brandon Moore, Jack Watercroft, and the TRCCA on opportunities to improve the skills and effectiveness of our county chairs. Also, please begin talking with Mike McCloskey and Senator Bettencourt on what kind of working group is necessary for state and local races. State and local parties should engage effectively in local races. Remember, I'm not looking for the committee to be doing the work. I'm looking for the committee to have a complete and thought-out recommendation to make to either the body or me or both as appropriate. The Legislative Priorities Committee, your charges, or Legislative Affairs Committee, your charge is pretty much set in the bylaws. For engagement, please be making recommendations for working groups. Naturally, I anticipate there will be working groups on Hispanic, Black, and Asian engagement. Please don't be afraid to recommend splitting those efforts up with achievable goals and recommendations for proper leadership. But also, we have great leaders in the party in the faith communities, in the activist communities, in the business community, from all ethnic communities. Please set those working groups up for success as well. Also, don't be afraid to look outside of race and ethnicity for focused engagement. There are opportunities with veterans, in the college community, the homeschool community, charitable communities, many others. Convention arrangements. While you will soon be busy with the nuts and bolts of the 2020 convention, during this past state convention, there was a commitment made to set up a working group to address the logistics on improvements of the business portion of that convention. Please have ready a recommendation on how to move forward with that, especially in regards to the platform process. Please be sure to pull in Mark Ramsey, Steve Armbruster, Beth Gabriel, get some insight on how to fairly set up and appropriately set up that working group. Advancement. At the last SREC, the Advancement Committee was working on recreating the Speakers Bureau. Please come back with a recommendation on that and the parameters that need to be in place for a working group to successfully pull that together. Now, in my first email to y'all, I already made mention of some working groups I knew we would already have. The first of those is election integrity. We are 72 days from early voting. Our election integrity working group needs to hit the ground running. Kathleen Wool has agreed to lead that effort. Edie Sinclair, James Zavaleta, and Steve Atwell have all expressed an interest in wanting to join. Our new Assistant General Counsel has agreed to help with the legal work. If you want to help the tasks included in the first email, this item's already discussed, get with Kathleen, she'll put you to work and make sure we're not duplicating efforts. Network building. I want to have a new network building working group that I outlined a few tasks to improve our intel and our ability to network effectively within the group. Since it's something our staff does anyway, our Executive Director, Kyle Watley, will be heading that up. James Zavaleta and Faith Bussey have already offered to help with that. Kyle will be putting people to work as you express interest. Technology. Chris Howe and Jared Ryan have volunteered to head up the first phase of this working group. They can use smart, techie people to help them complete this work. The working group will be taking inventory of all our tech assets and doing a bit of needs and wants assessment with the staff. They'll do a bit of research on improvements based on that. Staff will implement what makes sense. Then they'll report to Advancement Committee on ideas for more specific working groups to take advantage of the talents of our volunteers. Auxiliaries and coalitions. So we have the committee. We'll also have a working group because there's going to be a lot of stuff to do. And Terry Holcomb has volunteered to head up the working group and work closely with the committee on which he also serves. This will maximize coordinated effort between the RPT and the auxiliaries and coalitions as recommended by the committee. That working group will undoubtedly include representatives from the auxiliary and coalition organizations with whom we develop and implement plans to advance our platform and our shared priority. Now, I know this is a whole lot of information. But the bottom line is, we are going to take advantage of our secret weapon. And our secret weapon is thousands of dedicated, committed volunteers across the state who have knowledge and passion and desire and energy and willingness to help the Republican Party of Texas be more efficient, more effective, and more impactful than ever before. And this structure will help us take advantage of that. These working groups will add and drop people, will bring on SRC members and non-SRC members at every opportunity as needed, as opportunity presents itself. So keep your ears open, keep your eyes open, look for chances, listen for people who say, I want to make a difference in one of these areas, and put in the right people, and we will get them going. Any questions? All right. Then now we're on to county chair vacancies. Brandon and the interns have been hard at work finding people to step up at counties in counties that did not have people file for county chair in March election. I've appointed the following and asked for your ratification. I appointed Celine Schumacher to serve as chair in Dowling County, which is in the northwest corner of the Panhandle on the Oklahoma border. Celine is returning county chair. I appointed Malcolm Bozier to serve as chair in Dickens County, which is east of Lubbock. Malcolm is also the returning chair. I appointed Tony Salinas to serve as chair in Jim Hogg County, which is in South Texas. Tony is also the returning county chair. I appointed Buddy Williams to serve as chair in Mills County, which is west of Waco. Buddy was recommended by the previous chair, Dwayne Mosley. I appointed Deborah Ramsey to serve as chair in Morris County, which is in northeast Texas. Deborah is the returning county chair. I appointed Leighton Gates to serve as chair in Runnels County, which is between Abilene and San Angelo. Leighton is the returning county chair. I appointed Lynn Tyner to serve as chair in Shackelford County, which is northeast of Abilene. Lynn is also the returning county chair. I appointed Al Poteet to serve as chair in Blanco County, which is west of Austin. Al was recommended by the previous chair, Brenda Broadbeck, and Nathan McDaniel, campaign manager for Chippewa. I believe Al is still here, is he? Al? Yeah, stand with the way, everybody, Al. I appointed Ruben Radar Rodriguez to serve as chair in Presidio County, southeast of El Paso. Radar was recommended by El Paso County Chair Adolfo Tejas, Jennifer Weaver of Presidio County, and Mark Dunham, SREC SD29. I saw Radar earlier. Radar, you still here? Okay, stand up if you would. Let everyone give you a May I have a motion, please, to ratify these appointments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, before we move to announcements and adjournment, the last item on the agenda was requested by the committee woman from SC22. Ms. Sellers, would you like to present the topic?
I guess I just had a question before I accept policies. Do I go ahead and do that now, or? Okay. My question would be, are there requirements or expectations for staff that may limit their ability to exercise their free speech?
I'm sorry, can you restate the question?
Yes. are there requirements or expectations for staff that may limit their ability to exercise free speech?
Well, the short answer is yes. Just like I gave up a whole lot of my free speech ability in taking this position, and just like all my employees at my insurance company give up some of their free speech rights when they work for my company. Yes, there are limits on what a member of staff can say without harming the effectiveness of the body, and so therefore, of course, there are limits on what they can say. Just like I'm not allowed to take sides in any issues or in any primary or with any elected official.
Okay, can I have another question?
Sure.
How are those expectations communicated to the staff? Is there a written policy?
Sorry, our employee manual is like 60 pages long. I'm trying to remember. I actually don't know.
There's a social media policy on there about what you can and cannot, post on
Yeah,
social
there are multiple statements in there basically to the effect of you must remember that at all times you're representing the party and you therefore have to be careful about the way you do so.
Okay.
And certainly I've had that.
Are there any existing policies that might limit the staff to exercise their full rights as a delegate at convention and speaking on their own behalf?
Sorry, can you ask us something? I want to be sure.
Are there any existing staff policies that might limit the staff from exercising their full rights as a delegate or alternate at state conventions when they're testifying in front of committees on their own behalf and they state that they're speaking on their own behalf?
There is no separate policy, but there's also no exception that says, the policies say, as an employee of the party, you have to be very careful about what you say because it always reflects on us. It doesn't say it always reflects on us unless you say it doesn't. And it doesn't say it always reflects on us unless you happen to be at convention. It says it always reflects on us.
So they're testifying on any committee, or are they allowed to testify in front of any committee without having approval on what they say, even when it's per our principles?
Okay, two things. One, during convention is when we decide what our principles are. So you can't ever say that I'm testifying in committee at convention in accordance with our principles, because that's when they're deciding what the principles are. So you don't ever have that covered. Which is exactly why during the debates in my campaign, people would ask me where I stood on stuff. And no matter how strongly I felt about it, my answer had to be, my opponent went off on what she believed about whatever. But I had to say, I can't say anything about this because that might influence what the committee comes out with, what the convention comes out with, and I can't do that. I have to wait until they make their decision, and then I fight for what they've decided. The same guidelines that I had to fall under also apply to staff.
In the past few months, has there been any outside influence of the RPT? Has there been any outside influence of the free speech allowances over staff?
Mr. Chairman, point of information. I should say that's a pretty broad question. I will tell you, I get an earful about everything that happens or doesn't happen at the party, no matter who it happens with, all the time, including from the 60 members right here.
I got a point of information.
Yes, sir.
If I may. Terry Holcomb, SD3. I keep hearing free speech. Could we please clarify what we're talking about here? Because we're talking about the First Amendment, which is the only free speech I'm aware of. We're speaking to the government infringing on the ability of someone to speak how they feel.
Right, and so I said, I don't feel like First Amendment.
I mean, you had stated earlier that you do give up free speech rights when you're an employee of the RPT, but that's not actually correct.
True. What I do is I make a voluntary trade of what I would normally do as an individual.
Just so I'm clear, Mr. Chairman, however, and I'm not
It's a
trying to be
voluntary
argumentative. Free speech is the government infringing on your right to speak,
Right.
not your employer.
Correct.
Thank you.
So this is not an infringement. What's under discussion is not a First Amendment infringement of freedom of speech.
Mr. Chairman, Randy Denning, SD 16. I would like to ask, if staff becomes elected by their senatorial district caucus to represent that caucus at the state convention, are they second-class delegates, superdelegates, or normal delegates?
So my answer, as someone who was an elected delegate at the state convention, is the answer is none of the above. I was a delegate. Still, to be effective in my role with the party, it was absolutely critical that I not personally try to influence the outcome of any of the debates at the convention.
Okay, and so that policy is a policy that would then apply to all staff at attending conventions as delegates elected by their SD.
There is certainly no, I had no restriction preventing me from voting. I voted like crazy. There were 2 or 3 votes I remember that I had cast vote. So no, I'm not, no one would expect any delegate, staff or not, to have to do anything with their own voting rights.
Okay, and the voting rights and their ability to address committees. I think there's a distinction, and perhaps maybe this body needs to, in light of this posted topic, that we as a body need to discuss what should be the limits of what staff can do when they are elected to represent their district.
That is a reasonable discussion to have, and I would think that would end up, that could end up being some sort of change. But as it sits right now, our rules are crystal clear. No staff member is allowed to influence in any way any intra-party contest.
Okay,
Any intra-party activity.
Okay.
Convention committees are intra-party activity deciding what our policies are.
Well, then I see, like
So I read that to be, staff cannot be influencing this.
And I understand your position on that, and I am not offended or in any way upset by that position. What I am saying, though, is I think we need to have that discussion and make a firm policy, because this is something that I think is important. As Republicans, when we step into that convention, we're trying to affect, and we are representing the people that sent us. And it may be that staff should not be allowed to be elected to be representatives. That may be one consideration. Another consideration may be that they be allowed and have full rights as delegates. I think this is something perhaps this body needs to discuss. And I would like to see this put on an agenda.
It would strike me as something that makes sense to refer to a committee. Committees are
Which committee would be that responsible for that?
I would think that'd be Rules Committee. Or party organization.
Either one.
Who wants it?
I do believe this is an important issue. Because if they're elected as delegates, they represent the interest of the district that elected them. And they ought to have the full board and responsibility to represent their interests come with that. And if the rules as they stand now trump that, I think we as SREC have a responsibility to look at that issue and to ensure that if they're representing their district, that they represent it in the full capacity as a delegate. That includes debate, conversation, and voting.
I would like to make a motion, therefore, that this be referred to the party organization committee and have them report back to this body a recommendation. I make that motion.
So we have without objection, and that's what we'll do. Thank you. Now we move to announcements and adjournment. First, are there any announcements?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Debbie Terry, SD12, my personal privilege. I hope you've all had a chance to wish Kyle a very happy birthday. If you haven't, please do so. But we also are celebrating another birthday. And I would like to ask you to join me in saying happy birthday to someone who's been a wonderful servant leader, tireless for the SREC and for his district. He is my partner and dear friend, David Alberson.
Mr. Chairman, Mike McCloskey, Senate District 5. I've sent out 2 emails to the SREC. Last term, we did SREC shirts for the first time, but we have 29 new members this time that I thought should have one opportunity today. One opportunity. We did it for 6 months last time. I don't know if doing that again. If you want an SREC shirt and you don't have an opportunity to do that, I've sent you forms. I have the forms if you need it. Take your check or your cash today because I'm placing the order on Monday. So if you want shirts, today is the day to get the form from me, and I'll be glad to place your order. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCloskey.
Steve Allen, SD9, Candidate Resource Committee Chairman. We met for almost all day yesterday, 11-hour meeting yesterday to do the first round of distribution. Virgil will be a little bit more detailed than that. The second round will be on the 25th in Fort Worth at the Tarrant County Republican headquarters. You are welcome to come. Any SRC member can observe. We are in executive session during this, so that we do have restrictions on what you can talk about. Campaign plans and sensitive information will be discussed openly. We need more money. We're going to keep running the money right up to the end. So please get your envelopes in. Please go out there and get your TFRW clubs, any club with a pack. We just need to get some more money in. Because every one of us are seeing the Dems bushy tails are up. We got to fight back there.
So I'll do the other half of this, which is, yes, we met yesterday and we had a great number of candidates. We'll be giving details to the candidates this week, so we're not releasing anything today, but we have over 100 applicants for funds, and it is not too late, as Steve said. If you have candidates in need in your districts, please have them contact us at crc@texasgop.org. Please keep in mind that a candidate has to do a pre-application. We approve their pre-application. They do a full application, and separately, an SREC member or a county chair has to do a referral form so that we can have that information to make evaluations. So if you have candidates in need, now is the time. We're meeting in 2 weeks. We need these in within the next 10 days or so. So please let us know if you have questions.
One last thing. We completely revolutionized how we do this. We go from paper. We used to have to print 1,000 pieces of paper. They had to gripe and fill it out and scan it and send it in or mail it in. It's all electronic now. And this is the guy you can thank right here for doing this. He spent hundreds of hours. The funny thing about it is it's taking both of us to do what Jane Cancino used to do by herself. And one last thing, if you're going to hear probably some complaints from your elected officials or candidates about some of the questions we ask them. Like one of the questions was, if your county is fixing to turn blue, are you considering switching parties? We've had some interesting answers on that.
All right, well, thank you very much. Before we get to the next one, I did want to mention that you may or may not have seen the press releases, but we got some good TV coverage yesterday, both here in Austin and in San Antonio, after we filed suit to keep Pete Gallego off the And Pete does not live in Senate District 19, hasn't for at least 18 years. And his retort was, but I've got a utility bill. So it's very, very weak. But we will be fighting that significantly. There's also an ethics complaint. The house he does live in here in Travis County has disclosed on his financial filings. Even though he's it's its homestead exemption. His wife owns it, and he's a co-borrower on the mortgage. So spread the word about Pete Flores being right and only choice. It is long past time that people in District 19 have somebody who doesn't break laws and doesn't lie to them as their senator.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Point of personal privilege, please.
Yes.
And I might just add, so I live in Senate District 19, and when Peter Flores gets elected, no, you don't think my voice is loud enough? When Peter Flores is elected, there'll be some historic.
Name and seat.
Oh, Marion Knowlton, Senate District 19. Sorry, I'm a rookie. He will be the first Republican elected from that Senate district since Reconstruction. Think about that one. And he'll be the first Hispanic Republican ever in the Texas State Senate. And he'll be the first peace officer elected Republican to the Texas State Senate. So there's a lot of historic things going on here. Keep them in your prayers. Keep the word out there, because this is a winnable seat and we are going to take it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. As some of you may have noticed, the Grassroots Club Committee is doing something else. So in my retirement as your Grassroots Club Committee chair, I noticed we have a card on our desk, and we also have a whole new crop of SRAC members. How many of you are members of the Grassroots Club right now? Wow, even the newbies got in. Okay. If you're not a member of the Grassroots Club Committee, obviously pick up the card that's on your table. And let's make this thing, without a Grassroots Club Committee, let's make this thing bigger and bigger and bigger, and just make this thing. Use it in your SRAC, use it in your districts, use it in your clubs and your county chairs. Let them become partners of the Grassroots Club. Have them get in touch with Kyle and they can do that. Thank you.
No, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you saying that it would be appropriate, or at least not for me to exercise this point of privilege. Yes, Morgan Graham, SD 27. For those of you who don't know me, I'm also the county chairman in Cameron. And I was approached today by somebody who had a concern. There was a statement put out there that I was telling people to vote for Democrats. And it's very much a misunderstanding, and I'd like to go ahead and provide some context, that even though it was written into my post, it's apparently very necessary. The statement that I made was that, to my selected audience, was that it is incredibly important for us to vote for the best person for the job, as opposed to voting for the party. My audience are the people in my county. We are outnumbered 3-1 by Democrats, 40% of whom vote straight ticket. I have a number of Democrats and their leadership supporting our county judge's candidate. They are being threatened by the leadership under the state Democratic chairman and being told that they will have no futures in my county if they support a Republican on the ballot. That statement was made in support of them. It has been overwhelmingly supported by Republicans as well as the Tea Parties in my county. We also have Democrats who are upholding and sharing it as well, saying, why is it that it takes the local Republican Party to clean up the corruption? That is what I'm dealing with in my county. That was my intent. And I would be more concerned about anybody who would read a statement saying, vote for the best person for the job, and somehow that's synonymous as vote for the Democrat.
It just might behoove somebody to reflect upon that for a minute. Thank you for your time.
Brandon, did you have any announcements about committees or anything?
Now that we have the committee set and we have the committee chairs, I'll be working on trying to schedule those for the next couple of meetings to minimize conflicts, and I'll also be reaching out to committee chairs to work on any needs that they may have for in-person meetings here before the meetings, and if they have any teleconference meetings, what we need to do to facilitate that. And if I could, just since the SREC is the governing body and as staff, you are our bosses, and since Kyle Wadley is a workhorse who will just work himself to death, as you can see, and since it's his birthday, if a couple of members want to escort him out to his car so he can take the rest of the day off, that might be what it takes.
That would be great. Yeah, please make sure we get your voting place. If you are not on Trello, not on Slack, and would like to keep up with and contribute to the day-to-day operation of the party, please get with either Brandon or Joanna. They'll make sure to get you authorized and can send you the proper invitations. See one further announcement?
Yeah, real quickly, first, again, welcome to all the new members. This is the largest freshman class, if not ever, and then certainly in my tenure. I think that speaks good for the SREC in general. It's got a much higher profile than it did, at least when I came on a little over 6 years ago. If you haven't seen the new D'Souza movie, go see it. It's not going to get Academy Awards like Gone in the Wind or something, frankly, but it's got some great information about the roots of various policies in our nation that were actually started by the Democrats. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. Go see that. I went to the RNC meeting as a guest. Thank you, Chairman, for giving me a recommendation, whatever it was called, to do that. One of the things that I thought was a real highlight was when I heard Vice Chairman Jackson talk about converting people by using the RPT platform and talking to people door to door and saying, well, we stand for this, are you for that, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of the members of the RNC were pretty positively pleased with that. I'll give you one example of that. One of the things we had happen on the platform committee was we had some very compelling testimony against what Planned Parenthood has been able to do in the way of educating our children. And it turns out that some of their material is so offensively graphic that they actually have what's been referred to as an obscenity exemption in the Texas Penal Code. And so we put a new plank in this year in June that calls for removal of that obscenity exemption. Now think about this. Things that if you and I were doing to a neighbor, we could get incarcerated for, Planned Parenthood can go teach our 7-year-olds in public schools under this exemption. So we put a plank opposing that appropriately in the platform. The group that Kelly Shackelford hits got wind of this. They got in touch with Cynthia Dunbar, a former State Board of Education member of Texas, who's now an RNC member in Virginia. She put together a resolution condemning this because it turns out Planned Parenthood has put those similar kinds of laws in 43 states. And so about 1 month after we passed this plank in our platform, it's now gone nationwide via the RNC. And last, I would note to the new members, we're actually finishing up ahead of schedule. Don't get used to that.
Mr. Edwards.
Mr. Chairman, JT was ST11. By the way, welcome back, Mr. Chairman. Glad to have you back.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Jackson.
Lovely to have you. Look forward to your continued future leadership.
Here, here.
And our new members, welcome aboard. It's a very special if you're part of an institution that's 150 years old.
Here.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, I move for adjournment.
If I may. Thank you all very much for your prayers and thoughts over the last couple of weeks. Recovery is going as well as I possibly could expect. I really appreciate it.